Authors Over 50, Writing in Life's Sweetest Third. Authors Over 50's weekly podcast celebrates writers and their journeys to publication. Writing after 50 is a whole story on its own, so let's skip to life's sweetest third and talk with authors about their journey from pen to publish. Welcome. I'm Julia Daly, your host, and I invite you to listen to interviews with writers who've achieved their goal of publishing a book just later in life. We've seen award lists for under 30 or under 40, but I've yet to see lists for those who've achieved a significant milestone of their own, launching a new career and publishing their first book after the age of 50. We will hear about these authors' inspirations, struggles, strategies, and the smell of that first book. These writers' journeys inspire me because I'm one of them. My guest today is a San Antonio-based writer, award-winning child advocate, and retired U.S. Army major. As a former foster care youth and abuse survivor, she chronicled her journey from childhood trauma to child advocacy in her memoir, Misplaced Childhood, a true story of resiliency and child advocacy. She donates author profits or royalties to her local court-appointed special advocates organization, CASA program, because she's passionate about their mission of serving abused and neglected children in foster care. She's received many awards for her volunteer efforts for education and advocacy, most notably with CASA. She's also a DIY enthusiast and creates custom-painted themed furniture for children leaving foster care and entering their forever families. Welcome to Authors Over 50, Joan Ulsher.
Thank you. Thank you for that welcome.
Joan, I know that you know this from listening to the program, but our opening question on Authors Over 50 is always, what took you so long to write your first book?
I know it always seems like it's going to be a surprise question, but it's not. What took me so long is that I didn't know God had a secondary plan for my life. So I spent 20 years in the military thinking that was my purpose in life. And then later in life, just before age 50, I discovered the court-appointed special advocacy program for children in foster care, which, brought me back to my childhood experiences. And it was at that time that I realized there's more to this and I might have a story to tell. And so with inspiration from past and inspiration and encouragement from my CEO at Child Advocate San Antonio, I was able to pen this journey.
Well, that's really wonderful. And we thank you so much for your military service. And I, too, was a CASA, and so was one of my daughters. And my oldest daughter adopted 4 children, and I was adopted from a maternity home. So we believe in adoption, and we believe in removing children from the foster care program into permanent homes.
That's incredible. I knew that about you, and it just makes this interview all the more special.
It really does, because some of those children did experience what you did as far as the abuse. And so I'm looking forward to reading your book and to sharing it with them when they're able to digest it. Once you wrote this book, how did you proceed? Did you search for an agent, decide to choose a hybrid, a small press, or did you self-publish?
Well, that's a good question. I researched all avenues of public publication, and because I had employed many professionals in the process, I worked with a developmental editor, and then copy editor, line editor, proofreader, all that professionally from a one-stop writing service. I also went ahead and hired an attorney to do a privacy review, right of privacy, just to make sure that I wasn't encroaching on any copyright infringements or perhaps because of the nature of some of the information that I disclose is about children who are now grown and everybody signed releases. I wanted to get it all checked out. This attorney happened to be an agent. And so during the pandemic, we talked about the advantages and disadvantages of publishing through a traditional publishing house via using an agent and then querying them and querying publishing houses. If you're not a known entity at the time, he had advised that they were behind several years in getting the writing to press. And since my story includes some relevant and timely research relating to foster care statistics or maybe abuse statistics, et cetera, adding additional time frame to that would mean doing some substantial rewriting prior to print. So I went the self-publishing route by developing my own imprint and continuing with the one-stop writing service called One Lit Place out of Canada. Used their professionals to help me through the process and was able to publish on my own.
Well, there's so many options for us these days. We used to have to just go to one of the big five and hope that we would be picked up there. But now I'm hearing more and more about all the different ways that authors are getting their writing into the public. So that's very exciting.
Yeah, it's true. I don't recommend it for everybody, but I think that for me, I'm retired from the military, so I have plenty of time on my hands. My time is spent during the day advocating for children in foster care as their advocate, meeting with schools, professionals, the court, the caseworkers, visiting families. So I can balance my time commitment. So the other downtime I had, if I wasn't rehabbing some furniture for some of these children, I was dedicating that to researching how to go about getting this work into the public's hands as quickly as possible and as effectively in producing, let's say, royalties. Because as you mentioned at the start of the program, I do donate 100% of my royalties to the nonprofit here in San Antonio, Child Advocate San Antonio. So I wanted to be able to capture the largest royalty available, whether it was through Amazon or publishing on the Ingram Sparks platform. And then that way I can return all the money to Child Advocate San Antonio. So yeah, developing my own imprint and going that way just financially made sense for my overall mission.
It's a very wise decision. And, that you're so strong in this platform now that this book is really becoming your calling card and will get this significant platform out into the public. And I think that's very wise.
I recognized as I was telling my story, so this is not a traditional memoir. It's more of a hybrid memoir where I do start the beginning part of the book off on my story, my background, my lived experiences of child abuse and the foster care experiences. I transition on to adulthood and some of the continuing struggles I had in the military as a woman, mainly first assigned to an infantry unit. And then meeting my husband, my transformation through faith and God showing me my purpose in serving children. But then I talk about in depth that process of becoming a CASA. And you'll recall it's a very structured program of instruction that's based on a national standard. And so I wanted to really explain that to the public. So I divest a little bit from just the personal memoir experience and I delve into a bit of informative writing with my personal vignettes along the way, what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, what memories is it bringing up. And then I cross over to some of the stories of the children that I'm working with. So once I started kind of breaching that part of the book where I'm talking about other characters, mainly the children and how I'm serving them and meeting their needs, I realized the kids wanted to be part of the story. They wanted to be a bigger part of it. And at that moment, I said to myself, yes, this is going to be a self-published book. I'm going to do my own imprint because this is not going to be my only work. I know that I've got more stories in me. And whether it's going to be a collection of my children's stories as an anthology or the parent stories as an anthology, there are more voices that have stories that need to be told. And so I think that's now my calling in REM Press is to publish works like this story and other children's or families' experiences in the child welfare system.
Well, it's so important to get these stories out there because I don't think most of the population realizes the impact that abuse has on the survivors and how so many can stuff down those memories for so long, and then they just come rushing out and they affect you as an adult. So it's crucial that you tell us more about that and educate the public about being a survivor.
Yes, that was me. And part of what's interesting about my story is that the transparency that I put into my words and my choice of scenes throughout the book from beginning to end is vulnerability that has never been seen to those closest to me before. Even my husband has not experienced the full realm of what is included in my book. There was so much that growing up I just tried to stuff aside because it wasn't proper to walk around as a victim. And I never wanted to be a victim. I had these horrible things happen to me. But as I was adulting and coming into my own and trying to live a purposeful life, I realized that all that stuff in the past didn't matter. It was what I was choosing to do with it in the future. So if I could take those experiences and share them with other people so that they understand the realm of the darkness inside some homes and the types of abuse that can be hidden and secreted away, could be as close to you as the next door neighbor's child. It's a different world, and many people did not have those experiences. And so I wanted to expose that and expose that very transparently and vulnerably so that there was a real authenticity that came through in my writing for even older youth that have had experiences like mine to pick up that book and maybe perhaps find their own resiliency and maybe see their own hope and purpose in perhaps fostering or adopting or advocating for youth as an adult. So I'm hoping that the book can target a number of different audiences, specifically folks like you and me and your daughter who had chose to become court-appointed special advocates or guardian ad litems, but also those folks that may be interested in fostering or perhaps even mentoring youth. I think there's a purpose in this book for many people.
I believe so too. And, sometimes I've heard from authors when they write memoir that, their families are not very happy with them. And a lot of family secrets come tumbling out. Have you found that to be the case in your own family?
Yes. Okay. So we're about 6 months past the initial publication of my book, and initially it wasn't so bad. I knew to expect some fallout from my youngest brother. He's the only surviving member of my immediate family. I talk about how I lost my mom and my dad and my older sister, my older brother through my work. But my younger brother, he had signed a release early on. He knew what the topic was going to be, and he adamantly opposes that. And he's entitled to his own opinion. We're estranged from one another. And that was to be expected. And I think that I was prepared for that early on. But many months later, I wasn't prepared for other family that had been supporters for the last 30 years during my marriage that they didn't quite get it anymore. It was, I think that there's been some falling out now. I don't know what it is, but it's a risk to write a memoir and then not expose horrible secrets, but maybe expose vulnerabilities, mental health struggles, maybe things that another family member not connected may find embarrassing to be related to or associated with. The talk of child abuse, there's a stigma there. The talk of mental health, there's a stigma, suicide stigma. So there were some topics I think that upset some folks on the other side of the family, and that's still something that I'm I'm reeling from right now. It definitely hurts, and it's hard to process. You even question, gee, should I have written this? I mean, I have, but then I've got people reaching out to me and telling me about things that happened to them in my house, and now they're going through healing for the first time. So, was it purposeful to write this? Yes. Did it make a difference for those children, my friends? Yes. Is it making a difference for other youth in my community? Yes. And across the nation. So, more people have poured out the love and support and shared with me their innermost thoughts about their experiences and things that they're experiencing now from reading my work.
Well, it certainly has to be, but it's your story to tell. And it was your life and your experiences that you're sharing. And I grew up in the South where we swept everything under the rug, and, you weren't supposed to talk about anything. And, from religion to finances to politics, we didn't talk about those things. And, that in itself creates a lot of issues and covers up things horrific things that should be brought to light.
Yes, and I think the era that I grew up in too, I am going on 56 years old. So yes, author over 50. That era I grew up in, the 70s and the 80s, being a child in that time, there were many things that were faux pas to talk about. Incest, child molestation, alcoholism, drug abuse, suicide, mental illness, poverty, unemployment, even seeking public assistance. Those type of things were all secret and kept within the home, and you didn't share that with anybody. So it's something that society has to embrace and change and look at the destruction that it's caused in personal lives. And I think I do a good job of kind of highlighting that trend over time and then mirroring some of the struggles that my children today on my CASA caseload experience as well. You can remove the alcoholism from my parents' struggles, and you can replace it with drug addiction, methamphetamine, specifically here in San Antonio. And I think that the need to inform readers and the general public is important today about those topics that nobody wants to talk about.
That's so true. And every time I visit one of our cities, I'm just taken back at the homeless population, the mental illness that we have, the drug abuse and certainly child abuse is right in there and affecting so many adults now. And I just hope that we're able to find a solution to these problems.
I hope and pray for those same things. And I think that by putting this story out there, I really wanted to make my story more of a call to action for people to become informed about what could be going on around them in their own community. My story starts in Buffalo, New York, where I was raised, and then it transitions to my different moves with the military and even a deployment to Africa on a humanitarian exercise. And then finally, I settle in San Antonio, Texas, and enter the child welfare space as an advocate. And I learned to recognize that life is not so different for these children in Texas as it was in for me growing up in Buffalo. Um, our wardrobe has changed, our musical interests have changed, politics have changed, but poverty, drug abuse, alcoholism, abuse, neglect, it still exists. There are a lot of generational norms and stereotypes across all socioeconomical um, statuses that it affects everybody. So we've got to become better informed as a public, and then recognize how important it is to advocate for youth in the foster care system. How incredibly depressing it can be for me at times to see dogs and cats and stray animals taken so much more seriously. And now, not to minimize the plight of homeless animals and abused and neglected animals, our shelters are overflowing. But people seem to respond to the lost dog or the lost cat on social media more readily than they do to recognize that 15 children were killed in my community last year. At least 1 in 8 children is reporting child abuse every day. Um, Foster care statistics have dropped a bit. When I wrote my book, there were about 491,000 or more children in foster care, and it's dropped now as of this last December to about 432,000 children or 443,000 children in foster care across the nation. Does that mean the problem is getting better? No. It just means the laws have changed that provide for the removal of children. Children are still in danger, animals are still in danger, but people tend to pay a little bit more attention to the shelter animals than they do to children entering the foster care system, or maybe even an encounter with a family you see at the local grocery store or Walmart or at a park. We turn a blind eye when we see obvious abuse and neglect instead of intervening and maybe saying, hey, can I help you out? Is there something you need? Or maybe just buying a meal for that person ahead of you or behind you in line at a fast food restaurant. But we don't know what people's struggles are. And obviously, the pandemic the last couple of years has really changed the landscape, and I think has probably cloistered some more children within the home and perhaps resulted in lower numbers of reporting the abuse and neglect or suspected abuse and neglect. So we're facing so many challenges right now.
And it's just so overwhelming. Most of us don't even know how to become involved, or we think that what we do is on such a small scale, it's not going to make a difference. And you're preaching to the choir, sister, when you talk about our pets, because as much as I love my pets, if what was happening to them was happening like what's happening to children, we would have marches in the streets.
You would think so, yes. I love my pets, and something I string through my story is how important my dogs were to me as a source of comfort growing up. Whether it was my first cat and then a dog, and then eventually as I become an adult, I surround myself with my Akitas, my dogs that I've chosen that breed to follow me for life. And unfortunately, my husband's had to sign on to it too. He was never a dog person, but we get that, we have a soul, we have a heart for hurting animals and hurting children, hurting people. That's God's calling to be good natured that way. And I don't think that it's as difficult for people to do something to make a difference as they may think. And one of the predominant themes that I try to talk about in my book is that it really only takes one person to make a difference. It took one person to make a difference for me. The number of times that my brother Joey and I ran to the police station to report abuse, that my dad might possibly kill my mom that night, or that we were being abused, or that we were in horrible danger. And it fell on deaf ears because, heck, I was a child. We didn't know any better. We went to the police. Obviously, that never yielded any positive results, but somebody made a report to the proper authorities, and eventually we were both taken into foster care. It didn't last very long, unfortunately, but I was thankful that somebody made that call, and that person, I never figured out who that was. And then throughout the rest of my life, a person here and there, maybe a teacher or a military instructor, a military leader, a clinician, somebody throughout my life just paid a little extra attention and said, I think you've got a story in you. God loves you. You've got a purpose in life. You're doing good. I see you doing great things. And I'm just this lost kid, this young adult trying to find my way in life. But because people just encouraged me that way, that's one way that we can all make a difference in a young person's life today, whether it's, an employee or a relative, a nephew, a niece, a neighbor, perhaps a student. It just takes that outreach and showing compassion and authenticity in developing a relationship with somebody to show them and model resiliency themselves.
Well, even here in my small community, that's a pretty affluent area, when we were building a house for women and children to escape bad situations, everyone was amazed. They didn't think that that existed here in this small community, and they have been shocked as to how many women and children are being served in that halfway place.
Oh, that's incredible. I wouldn't even have thought about that either because, right, you're in a remote location in the hill country in Texas, and I know that area well. It's beautiful. Um, but yes, people struggle everywhere. And I'm in a dense metropolitan here in San Antonio. And at times, we're either the sixth or seventh largest city in the nation. I'm not sure exactly where we land right now, but our population is definitely growing. We're in a condensed space. Traffic abounds us. And it could be the car right next to you as you're driving along the freeway, and there's an altercation going on in the car, and you're actually a witness to it. So it's a scary world we live in, and oftentimes we just want to be complacent, mind our own business, and stay out of it. But at the very minimum, pray. Pray for these people. Pray that we find hope. Support your nonprofit. Support the battered wives and children's shelters. Support the local CASA or GAL advocacy program. Support the caseworkers that work for the DPS or the Department of Family and Protective Services. Anybody involved in child welfare or family welfare are on the front lines. They need support. There are many ways that we can reach out to those organizations and perhaps offer some sort of form of advocacy for them. It could be spreading social media that brings awareness to the need for more volunteers or more foster parents. It could be opening our wallets and donating. It could be stepping up and perhaps serving food on the Thanksgiving food line or donating food to the local pantries, whether it's in a small town like yours or in a large city like mine. It doesn't take much to find out that there are problems in our community. We just have to look hard enough and you'll find them.
And we haven't even mentioned sex trafficking in our country today. So that's another horrific issue that we need to address.
Yeah, and definitely in Texas, the population that I serve, the children in foster care, I think there's roughly 25,000 children in the foster care system in Texas. We're obviously one of the biggest states in the nation that have a large population of kids in care. A lot of kids go missing. I've had children on my caseload that have gone missing and have been feared trafficked, and I work diligently and very closely with the caseworker to get those kids recovered and get them back home safely. But too many of those children, they disappear, they run away from residential treatment centers because there's not enough foster homes, and they run away from some good foster homes too, and even family members they run away from, and they become trafficked. And then that's not even to mention all the undocumented kids that have come across the border that there's really no real accountability for, and they're now entering some of our child welfare systems in various jurisdictions. Some of those children, we don't know who they belong to, but somebody steps up and realizes they're in danger. So far too many children are in danger and facing crises that none of us can fully imagine unless we open our eyes, our ears, and our hearts and our minds to being part of the solution.
Joan, why don't you tell us a little bit about the passage you've brought to share today and then read so we can hear your tone and voice in the book?
Sure. So my book is titled Misplaced Childhood, A True Story of Resiliency and Child Advocacy. So as a child advocate, I started this journey in 2018. So I'm going on about 6 years, and I've served about 24 children. I knew from the moment I met my new CEO back in 2021 that we both shared a common background, abuse and a foster care experience. Her story was so inspiring to me that I leaned across the lunch table and I said, Angie, I think you should write a book about your life. I'm just in awe. And she leaned back at me and said, oh no, you're going to write your story. And I'm like, no, I'm not an author. I'm not a writer. This is not my journey. But in April of 2021, I lost a beloved aunt and found myself back in Buffalo and helping my cousin celebrate my aunt's life. And I wandered back to the cemetery where my brother was buried. And so I hadn't been there in 35 years. And so the opening passage that I'm going to read you is from my prologue, which gives a little detail about that 35-year passing of my first reuniting with my brother. So here we go. This is from Misplaced Childhood, A True Story of Resiliency and Child Advocacy. It had been 35 years since my brother Joey was buried in Holy Cross Cemetery's Garden of Joyful Mystery, and my first visit since his funeral. Buffalo was no longer my stomping ground, but that was no excuse. He deserved more. Plot number 115 was difficult to find in the pouring rain that April. I did a grid coordinate search for nearly an hour before discovering the overgrown grave. It was a simple granite military headstone inlaid in the grass. The years showed neglect. The marker was sunk deep into the ground, and I immediately peeled back the dense grass and scraped mud from the engraved headstone with my fingers. The rain stopped, and Joey's name, etched into the gray granite, was now visible. I talked to my brother for the first time in over 3 decades. I finally said aloud the things we had kept secret. I asked for his forgiveness for not speaking up about the abuse sooner. He had protected me when I could not protect myself, and I acknowledged this. A burden lifted. There were more ways to honor my brother. Memories and emotions flooded me. Joey never got a chance to share his story, but I could make that right. This story could make a difference for children like we once were, young and innocent. My siblings and I endured shocking abuse and neglect as children. We did not have court-appointed special advocates back in the day. CASA did not exist. Yet, by the grace of God, here I was, serving children in foster care as a volunteer child advocate in Bexar County, Texas. As a child, I could not define resiliency. Finding my voice, healing my soul, and becoming stronger after trauma became a lifelong process. Developing resiliency empowered me to fight for the most vulnerable children in our community. Consequently, I became a fierce advocate for children in foster care because of what I overcame as a defenseless child. Joey did not get that chance.
Oh, Joan, that's so poignant.
Thank you. Yeah, it was very important for me to dedicate this book to my brother Joey. I lost him when I was a senior in high school. We had been separated when we went off to foster care, and I never saw him alive after that day. Um, so it really made all the sense when I was back in Buffalo just 3 years ago, this April, and recognized that I needed to make amends with him for some of the grievances that I had about his passing and about some of the guilt, about not being able to speak up as if that was something I could have done as a kid. We tried. Our fate was not in our hands. But today, with an advocate by a child's side, it gives that child's voice so much more strength and power in the courtroom. If I had had an advocate, if Joey had had an advocate back in the day, we perhaps would have been able to see one another. Perhaps we could have had sibling visits. Perhaps we could have been placed together. Perhaps it would have never been the last time I'd seen him alive. Perhaps I wouldn't have been returned home to an abusive environment. Perhaps my brother wouldn't have been left in as a ward of the state. So many what ifs. And that's why it's so important what I do today and what you've done and what your family has generationally done for the community as well. This is an important mission, and I hope that I can find new readers that have never explored the boundaries of child advocacy so involved in the process. Because one person can make a difference. And I know if I can make the difference in any child's life, it's going to make a difference in our community, and our community is going to be a better place because of it.
It's such a powerful mission, and I just appreciate your efforts so very much because I see those children, and we're reluctant to reach out. We're reluctant to get involved if we're just, facing that abuse head on, and the parents there. And I've seen so many children that no matter what the abuse, they always want to be with those parents because that's what they know. That's all they know. And sometimes the unknown is scarier than staying in what they know.
Yes, that's a sad fact of life. I think in my story, because I endured abuse probably 10 years, running to the police station and getting no resolve, that it just got to the point where we were so broken, like a broken horse. You just got to the point where, it didn't matter if you had a saddle thrown on you and you were ridden 18 hours in a day. We had no voice anymore, and we just needed to be taken away. But children today, they're so protective of their parents. They don't recognize the sickness of drug abuse. They don't recognize the sickness of homelessness or mental illness, and they just want to cling to that familiarity. I have to be very careful as an advocate to not place my personal bias of wanting to be removed from my family and get a new family into the stories of the children that I work with. It takes a delicate balance and a firm foundation in who you are as a human being, and trusting in your training and trusting in your supervisor to really lean in and advocate for the best interest of these children and these families. I love it when families are reunited. I had the most beautiful story of a family of 7 being reunited in December, and it was touching. They truly loved one another and they deserved to be together. But there had been some problems that the parents had, but those actions were remediated, and new services were brought on board where the parents got a fresh start at life. And then the children got reunited, and I still occasionally hear from this family, but those type of stories warm my heart. And the other stories were, parents' rights may get terminated because of lack of participation, or perhaps things that are so devious that you can't overcome a serious injury to a child, resulting in near death or dismemberment or severe disability. In those cases, you work as hard as you can to find family to take those children in, or to have the child adopted into a safe and loving home so they can be a protective member or a productive member of society one day. And we just model that strength and encouragement and resiliency for those children.
Well, just seeing that one family reunited has to really bring hope to your mission, and that there will be others like those who can be healed.
Yes. And, in a way, I feel like when I talk to these youth, I usually work with teenagers because I was a teenager by the time I entered foster care. So I have a real heart for these older youth. And plus I think I just communicate better with an older population where you can talk to them, as human beings. There's no baby talk. There's no guessing what a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old is thinking. I'm dealing and communicating with genuinely smart children that deserve to have their voice and their situation elevated. They need to be heard. They want to be heard. So the first thing I do is offer them an ear. And then I step in and ask them if they want me to be part of their life, that I will be there for them through the long haul. They can always contact me after they find permanent placement, and I'll stay in touch and provide them any guidance. And I try to let them know that I was once in their shoes. Our experiences are not the same. I can't identify exactly what they've been through. Each of us have different traumas we've been through, but I do want them to see that there is hope because I made it through, and I believe they can make it through. And when I work with a youth that can hear that and they can verbalize understanding, then to me, I feel like they're going to change the future of this community. At some point, at 56, it's not going to be too long before I'm in a wheelchair in a nursing home or something, and these youth are going to be the kids that are going to be the caregivers there, and I'm going to feel like I'm in good hands because I think that we're going to turn out some professionals in this world, in San Antonio, across Texas, across the country, and these young children are going to grow up to be doctors and lawyers and nurses and caregivers and teachers and botanists and scientists and you name it. We don't have to see these children as the negative statistics that we often hear about: homeless or incarcerated, the foster care to prison pipeline. We've got to stop that. We've got to stop that. We can intervene and reshape a child's future for the good.
Well, you certainly are doing that, and you're helping to break the cycle of abuse, and it doesn't have to go to the next generation. It's very difficult not to when that's all that's been modeled for these young people who have just seen parents who do abuse. So, that's so wonderful that you can help break that cycle.
Precisely. Thank you.
Do you have another passage that you wanted to read from your book
Sure.
today?
One more. So my book, I broke it down into several parts, and so they're thematic in nature. And the first part is really my personal journey as a child. So when I get to the end of part one, this is a chapter called Adjustment. I just want to just the last couple paragraphs gives you a little summary to launch through the rest of the book. So here we go. It took nearly a lifetime to heal from the trauma I endured as a child. My misplaced childhood was marked by police inaction and inconsistencies in child protection services. I was failed on many levels, but perhaps none worse than the court ordered family therapy. Facing my father in a so called therapeutic environment destroyed any self esteem or courage I had within me. Child advocacy centers like CASA and others did not exist in my early years. They evolved later and spread across the country out of the need to protect other children like me. Societal norms when I was a child were different than those today. City, states, and the nation evolved with an interest in safeguarding children better. Fortunately, outcries of abuse are taken more seriously today. Many childhood memories are hidden in my subconscious, perhaps misplaced. However, enough vivid recollections of my childhood have guided my transformation from a defenseless and fragile child to the fierce and persistent volunteer advocate child advocate I am today. This was resilience. My parents' alcoholism led to severe emotional, physical, and sexual abuse and neglect, and unlikely people would help me find my way. Secrets long since locked away would eventually become exposed as I learned to accept my past, forgive my abusers, and seek to turn my experiences into tools that would help me communicate and relate to traumatized children as the CASA advocate. There was a plan formulating right before me. The path to healing was ahead of me. I was an adult. Early life would be more manageable now. I did not expect the road ahead to be paved with more challenges. As a young person, I had no idea my life's trajectory would change forever. And that concludes part one. So you get an idea that I don't want to provide a memoir of just horrific abuse from chapter one to the end. I brush on it in the beginning of the book and then want to advance the rest of the writing to show that even though a child can come from a difficult situation and be rescued from that situation, it doesn't mean the struggles are going to stop. So I did experience some hardships as an adult that brought some additional traumatic experiences into my life in the military, but eventually there would be hope. And you would know that at the end of this book, the end of this journey, there is a happy ending because here I am serving children in San Antonio, grateful to God to be alive and grateful for Him to have led me on this path later in life. Because as we started this interview, what took me so long? Everything is God's path and God's journey. It's God's timeline. So I could not have forced myself into this work 30 years ago. It was only on God's doing that I am doing what I am doing now because He knows I'm ready and prepared and healed to do it. And that's what it is about. Just use those past experiences and do something for the good right now.
Well, you're certainly doing that. And I do believe in timing. And I've heard from so many who say that writing their stories, really are therapy and are healing, and especially to come through the childhood that you did. It has to be a healing process to get this on paper and to get it out of your body and out of your soul onto paper so that you can direct and help others to do the same thing.
Yeah, I didn't expect that there was going to be some additional healing in writing this, but obviously when I first wrote my story, I thought, hey, it's a great story, but I had to go through about 100 reiterations. And my CEO at Child Advocate San Antonio read every version, and my developmental editor would look at it and go, I need more here, I need less here. You need to go in depth here. And I'm like, oh, that's something I've never talked about before. So yeah, it forced me to come to grips with some very important details of my life. And what I disclose in the book is only a fraction of what came up for me, but everything was not necessary to include in the book. I'm not out to make a hit piece about my family. I'm not out to traumatize readers. I do have kind of informed, trauma informed guidance at the beginning of the book that says, hey, this could be trigger producing, so be careful. But ultimately, the idea is to show strength in my faith in the Lord and in showing me that what I'm doing now is for right for these kids.
Well, Joan, we could just talk all day, but it's been a great visit. Our last interview question on authors over 50 is always our writers over 50 are a unique set. Do you have advice for writers 50 and above?
Yeah, I would say take it slow and steady. Uh, Manage your expectations. Don't rely on these groups on social media that tell you what you have to write or how you have to write it. Get yourself connected with a professional organization. Like I said, I used One Lit Place out of Canada. There are others out there. But don't rely on other wannabe writers because you don't know who they are. You don't know what kind of advice you're getting, and there's a lot of lifetime hurts that people have had wrapped up inside them that influence the recommendations and decision making that they lend to other fledgling authors. So it's never too late to write your life story or a fictional story, or even another genre. But I would say arming yourself with a lot of research, being careful who you select and solicit advice from will guide you steady through the process.
Well, Joan, we appreciate you being with us so much here today because you are a strong woman who is a true survivor. And when others read this important, significant work of yours, they're going to reach out to you and they're going to tell you how it's affected their lives and how you've given them so much hope. And I think that's what it's all about, is just to give hope to the next person who's just a few steps behind us. So thank you for being here and sharing with us today. And we're excited to now call you one of our authors over 50.
It is so exciting. Thank you. It has been a delightful experience speaking with you. I hope we cross paths in wine country one day. And yes, for any new readers out there that discover this work, by all means, reach out to me via my website. The publisher's email address is there, and I welcome feedback. And actually, I'm really excited to learn of other stories that are of a similar nature. So I like to cross promote other books all the time. So I'm open to additional learning experiences as well.
Well, it's been an honor.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. Please look for Authors Over 50 every Thursday when we will have conversations with accomplished debut novelists over the age of 50. Please subscribe and share with a friend. And check out my own publication journey after 50 at www.juliadaily, that's DAILY, like dailynewspaper.com. Until next time, keep reading and writing. And remember, it's never too late to fulfill a dream in life's sweetest third.